Have you ever wondered if you're working with the right advisor, or which advisor should you be working with? Or do you know anything about the advisory field and the different types of advisors? That's something we're going to cover in the podcast today.
So choosing a financial advisor, we're going to help you avoid some common mistakes when it comes to that part of your planning life and your planning process on today's show. Walter alongside Janine Theus here on Rockin Retirement, and hope to help you out a little bit today with some better financial knowledge. All right, Janine, I don't think we have to set this one up too much, right? Like, people choose a financial advisor at some point in their life, and most likely. And so we're going to help them avoid some common mistakes so they don't choose the wrong one, because that's a bad path to start down if you don't make the right choice or work with somebody who's the wrong fit, right?
Right. So here's an interesting statistic for folks.
Okay.
80%, and obviously that's like a clean number, but so it's somewhere in the 80% range, of women who suffered, go through a divorce or a life event where they lose the husband, change the advisor that they're working with.
Interesting.
And it's because, generally speaking, it's the husband who picked the advisor. The feedback, there was a tremendous article that was written about this, typically, and actually this is one of the things that drove me into the business, is the gentleman we were working with was always talking to my husband.
Okay.
And kind of
Not
ignoring me. Yeah. And and the type of advisor he worked for a brokerage firm. He was a VP at a brokerage firm. Really nice guy. I liked him. I coached his kids, so I knew him. But he started, I remember distinctly at one meeting, he's talking about all this stuff up here, the economy, this, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm a smart woman. Everything you're talking about has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with our finances. So that's what made me start looking and eventually to become a holistic advisor that looks at the whole picture, that helps people understand the whole financial picture and gets the personal side. And what's interesting is there is a massive amount of wealth transfer that's coming because men usually die first. So women are left managing the money. And so there's this massive wealth transfer that's going to occur to women. And then you've got the millennial generation, where a lot more women are making really good money. And so they're starting to take more of an active role in managing money, making financial decisions. Women have always predominantly made purchasing decisions. But it's been my experience that a lot of women are like, okay, I don't know anything about this. I want you to handle it. Okay, but I want you to understand conceptually what we're doing, because that's really important. I think it's important.
Yeah.
So choosing the right financial advisor. There's an advisor who works for the wirehouse, and this isn't to denigrate anybody for where they work. It's how you're trained. So if you work for the wirehouse, you work for a large mutual fund company. I could name several, but I better not.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Their focus is rising in the corporate ladder. So they don't necessarily want to create a relationship, have a relationship, help you with all your other financial issues. They just want to make sure you're a client, and then they're going to get to move up because their numbers are increasing.
And they hand you off to somebody else.
They hand you off to somebody else. I talked to somebody who said, we call into, it's one of the big mutual fund companies, and we call in and we keep getting these different advisors. I go, because that's not their job. Their job is corporate. They just want to collect assets and move up the ladder. So there is that particular type. There's people who are just insurance sales people. This is not saying insurance is bad, but the focus is selling a product. So whether it's insurance, life insurance, whatever the insurance product is, even annuities, the focus is on selling a product. They're not necessarily fiduciaries yet, according to Congress. The folks that work for the wirehouse are not fiduciaries, and the folks who work for the banks are not fiduciaries. Now, this could all change, and Congress could rewrite all the definitions and terms.
Sure.
But the person who is the fiduciary actually works for the client. You have to put the client first. So there's three types of advisors. So which advisor are you working with?
Well, great setup. You want to do some rapid fire on common mistakes then, as people are evaluating all of these big decisions.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got 7 to throw out to our viewers today. So number 1, not understanding how the advisor gets paid. That sounds like it loops right in with not understanding the type of advisor you're working with.
Right. So someone who is just pushing product. I hate to use that term, but that it's out there. The entire insurance industry, whether it's health insurance, property and casualty insurance, long-term care, Medicare, it's all commission-based. So the question is, are you being sold a product for the commission that the person makes, or are you purchasing a product because it fits in with your plan? So that's a different way to look at it, but that's the danger of just pushing product, if you will.
Yeah.
And
at least understand that that's a part of the conversation.
Right. So some people just get paid commission only. Some in the securities business, which is stocks, bonds, equities, mutual funds, things like that, there are also securities that are commissionable. Typically, those are brokers. Typically, there's some large firms that is their emphasis, and it has to do with the type of shares, the mutual fund shares that they sell. So, do you know how mutual funds actually work? Do you know what happens with the taxes? Do you know how the person gets paid typically if they're selling specific mutual funds? It's similar to the brokerage houses. They get paid a commission. So is that in your best interest? You have to know a little bit about how that all works. So not saying it's bad, it's how they're trained.
Yeah.
It could be bad for you, but you'd have to understand, what was the recommendation?
Yeah.
And then then there's the fee-based advisor. Typically, fee-based advisors are investor advisor representatives. They are fee-based in that you get a fee for assets under management. You might get a planning fee for doing the full plan, and that's very upfront. It's very transparent.
Yep.
So typically, those of us who've been fiduciaries for a long time, that's how we get paid.
We could do a whole long show, I would imagine, just on the how advisor gets paid part of the process here. Common mistake number 2 when somebody's looking for a financial advisor, they put too much trust in a recognizable national brand name. I feel like you kind of hit on that with the Wirehouse conversation, so we're probably covered on that one. This one I think is really interesting, though. The third one on our list, nodding and smiling and just kind of agreeing along instead of asking for clarification on things that you don't understand. This one seems really important to me because you want an advisor who's going to teach you, who's going to help educate you. And if you're not just being forthright by saying, hey, I don't understand that, can you go over it? Then you won't even be able to learn if they're a great teacher.
Well, and so there's a really interesting thing happening with the younger crowd. They're more willing to speak up and say, well, in fact, I just had one, she's an engineer, and she just sent me this whole list of questions. And so I just answered all her questions, but because she's an analytic, and I get that. But the older crowd, typically women especially, but will not, and I've seen this happen in meetings where the advisor is going so fast through the calculations that the clients can't follow.
Yeah.
But they don't want to ask a question because they don't want to appear dumb.
Sure.
And so that's a problem because you should be able to stop an advisor just like you would stop a doctor.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Explain it again.
Yeah.
You know, because you have to be comfortable with what's happening with your money. I mean, it is your money. Yeah. So
that's a great point. I got comfortable at a young age saying, "Hold on, I'm dumb. Can you do that again, or show me that again, or explain that to me? Explain that like I'm 5, and just throw my ego out the door and be like, I want to learn it. I want to understand. So I'm comfortable with not knowing and looking like an idiot. You know?
Well, and I think
that
that's
served
really
me well. You know.
Yeah. I think that's really important because nobody knows everything all the time. And I think it's really important to ask questions. Especially women need to ask more questions. And it doesn't mean you have to know, you don't necessarily need to know how the watch works, but you do need to know that it works.
Sure.
And there's a way to explain that so people understand conceptually what's happening. And I have a lot of clients who said, I have a doctor client that said, hey, I don't know squat about this. I'm a darn good doctor, but I don't know anything about this.
Yep.
And she says, that's why I'm hiring you. And I'm like, great, but I am going to expect you to have a conversation.
Yep.
So
That's a great point, though, and that's why that's a common mistake. And just as simple as, if you have a question, ask about it. It's a mistake to then not bring it up and go over it. So definitely glad that we can cover that one. Another one on the list is working with someone with the wrong specialty. I feel like you hit on that one pretty well. If you need a retirement planner, don't work with someone who's just going to sell you stocks and mutual funds, right? We need to make sure we're working with somebody in our wheelhouse for our phase of life and what we're trying to do. Also on the list, we have not checking credentials and the background of the advisor. Now, we can all do a Google search, Janine, and I would say that should be a bare minimum, right? At least Google the advisor's name, make sure that there's not some news story about something bad that they've done in the past or something like that. But what are the other, give us a quick hitter on other resources that we can use to check, maybe just credentials or complaints or something like that.
Yeah, you can go right to brokercheck.com and put in the advisor's name, and you'll get kind of the ADV and the history. To do any work with an advisor, especially an independent advisor, they have what's called an ADV, and you will get a copy of that. And it just demonstrates that they are properly registered and licensed to do business. I think one of the greatest scams, frauds, whatever you want to call it, I mean, it's a scam, is to write a check personally to an advisor. Never, ever do that. That's what happened with Bernie Madoff and the biggest Ponzi scheme, is they wrote checks to Bernie, and you should never do that. You always write it.
On our next video, in fact, folks, little teaser, coming out next week, we actually have a story, not about Bernie Madoff, but another advisor who was dabbling in that world. We've got a Brokers Behaving Badly video for you next time around, and it involves that check writing. So, check the ADV, go to brokercheck.org, right? .org?
.org.com. Either one comes up. Yeah.
Try them, make it work. And then, even a simple Google helps you out a little bit in some cases. All right, last two is two common mistakes that people make when they're looking to work with a financial advisor and choosing an advisor: failing to discuss your financial goals. So if you're not talking about goals, something's wrong in that meeting, right?
It can be a failure. It can result in a failure. What you sometimes find is the husband and the wife are not on the same page. So if you don't speak up, then your wishes and dreams, etc., don't get planned for. And that could be a problem down the road. So it's much better if you just put it all on the table. And then, sometimes you got to hash it out. I mean, sometimes I feel like part marriage counselor, but
but that's what it is. Go back to school and get that get that degree, right?
But
probably would help in your meetings.
It does help to have frank discussions. What's important to you?
Make sure you're bringing those things up. Last but not least, Janine, not trusting your gut. If it's telling you the advisor's the wrong fit, trust it and go with it, right? I feel like you probably are coaching a lot of people to trust their gut more, not just with choosing an advisor, but with a lot of different elements of their financial life.
Well, I think people have better filters than they sometimes realize, and you do have to listen to that, because people do give themselves away. And somebody who doesn't have your best interest at heart will give himself away or give herself away. It's not always just men. So you really do have to trust your gut. Now, you can have miscommunication. That happens occasionally, but ask questions. But generally, if something doesn't seem right or doesn't feel right, you definitely want to either challenge it or walk away.
Great points. As always, Janine, appreciate your help guiding us through such an important conversation, choosing a financial advisor and trying to avoid some of the mistakes that people have made in the past and will continue to make into the future, but not you, because you've watched this video. If you want to talk to Janine, if you're looking for a financial advisor and you like some of the content that we do here on the channel and you'd like to have a more one-on-one conversation with Janine Theus, you can certainly do that. Schedule your time to visit online at theuswealthadvisors.com or call call her at 443-718-6311. We'll link to that contact information in the description of today's show, so check it out there. Janine, thanks for your help on the video today, and we'll look forward to that brokers behaving badly segment next week.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Walter. See you soon.
Appreciate you. Come back and join us, everybody, on Rockin' Retirement.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.